Alright, welcome to another Paves Garage video, second one this year. I'm on a roll. So in this video we're going to actually make the mould for the roof. I'm going to go through it in a tedious amount of detail, so if you're thinking about doing some carbon fibering, this is the video to watch. So in the last video, we went through the process of preparing the roof through filling in the sunroof and then preparing it with a lot of body filler, sanding, and then painting it ready to take the mould. In this video, we're going to go through the process of actually making this thing. And making a mould is a relatively simple process. The mould is comprised of two primary components, being the inner gel coat, which is this blue layer here, and then underneath it, it is backed by fiberglass to give it some strength. Now, the first thing I'm going to do to prepare the old roof for the mould is to create a bit of a flange around it using some plastic cardboard poster and just a little bit of release tape. And this serves two functions. First one being to ensure that the gel coat doesn't get in behind any parts on the roof, which would make the mould actually sort of mechanically lock onto it. And secondly, it gives a bit of a flange on the roof, which you need around the edges of the part to adhere your vacuum bagging material onto, and to give you a place to put some vacuum pumps and a resin infusion line. With the flange in place, the next thing I'm doing is placing some putty around the edges where the flange meets the roof. This just ensures that no gel coat gets in between the flange and the roof, which again would make that mould lock onto the roof. The next thing I'm doing is applying mould release wax. This is applied in about 3 coats, allowing about 15 minutes to dry in between each coat, just buffing it on and off with a regular rag. Right, next step in this process is spraying on some part-on release film. You can get away with just either using just wax or just this release film, but I figure can't hurt doubling up a bit. I'm just going to apply this using a spray gun as usual. Difference with this is you've got to adjust it so you only have the tiniest, thinnest amount of film coming out as possible. It's not like you're trying to layer on a big, thick layer. Alright, now we've got 3 layers of the PVC release agent over the top of the wax, which should make sure that the mould comes off nice and easy. Next step is to put a layer of tooling gel coat over the top of the roof. That's going to form the inside of the mould, which the carbon fibre sits on top of. Then once that dries a bit, it gets to a stage where it's kind of tacky, we lay some fiberglass over the top of that and use the general purpose epoxy resin to mould it to the back of the tooling gel coat, which makes sure it's nice and strong. So the tooling gel coat that I'm using comes as a fairly thick, dense blue paste. It's almost like the consistency of a really thick toothpaste, which can make it quite difficult to mix. So a good little trick to make it a lot more mixable and then a lot more spreadable on your part is to actually mix it in a tub of warm water, which just makes it so much more runny and easy to work with. So you want to build up a layer of the gel coat that's somewhere around 1 or 2 millimeters thick, and you can apply it using a brush, or in the case of a really large flat part like this, you can just pour the gel coat on and spread it out with a blade, which you'll see me switch to shortly. One really important aspect to applying the gel coat is making sure that there's no bubbles or crevices inside the gel coat. This is because we're doing vacuum resin infusion moulding, and if there's any bubbles inside the gel coat on the surface of your mould, that can in some cases lead to air eventually escaping out through the gel coat, through your fiberglass backing, and creating a vacuum leak which is almost impossible to find. So it really pays off to take your time to really massage in the gel coat. Alright, with the gel coat at a point where it's fairly firm and tacky, that's the time to start applying the fiberglass backing. The fiberglass that I'm using is a 225 gram per square metre chop strand mat, which is a pretty standard fiberglass to use for this sort of application. The only problem with it though is that it is quite stiff and difficult to get it to conform into tight corners or concaves. So what I'm doing is, for the roof rails, is just chopping up strips and then crushing up inside a shopping bag, which will then make it a hell of a lot easier to make it conform inside those roof rail areas. So this first layer of fiberglass is what's called your backing layer, and it's probably the most important step in this process to get right. What you've really got to make sure is that your fiberglass has really good adherence to the gel coat underneath, really making sure that there's no air pockets in between the gel coat and the fiberglass, because if there is, that can lead to a weak spot in the gel coat and lead to a total failure of your mould. So you'll see me here just really stippling in plenty of resin with a brush and even my hands, just really making sure that it's stuck on there well. So I ended up running out of my general purpose resin and started using a bit of my resin infusion resin. Both cost about the same, so it's not too big of a deal. But what really surprised me was how much resin this mould soaked up. I think I ended up using somewhere in the order of about 4 or 5 litres of resin, which is not only a lot in volume, but also costs quite a lot. So that was something I wasn't expecting here. I'm also just using a aluminium roller, either with spikes or grooves in it, just to help these layers really stick to each other. Right, it's been drying for a couple of days now, and now it's time to attempt the demolding. I'm just going to try and separate the mould from the roof, chuck some paddle pop sticks inside the gap in between the mould and the roof, and then give it a blast with a air compressor to hopefully get the compressed air to lift the mould off the roof. I'm pretty nervous about this working actually, because it's taking a lot of time and effort to get to this point, and if this mould fails, it's going to be pretty annoying. Fuck. So, my air compressor hose has a leak in it, and I taped it up with some gum tape a few days ago. And that banging as it just letting go. So I made quite a lot of practice parts before attempting this big roof, and in those smaller practice parts I really found that you've got to take your time with the demolding process. It can feel like the mould just isn't going to come off, but usually it will. You just have to take your time, be gentle, and don't damage the mould. So this part here is a little bit of an issue. A whole bunch of resin has leaked down into this channel, and it's making separating the mould here really difficult. So with that, I took my time to gently and delicately bash the absolute shit out of it with a hammer and a screwdriver, and that seemed to work. So it's really just a matter of being able to pry an edge up off the part, get a paddle pop stick in there, work as much of it loose as you can, and just work your way all the way around till eventually this happens. Hell yeah. Alright, that was a big moment. It has come off surprisingly easy, and upon initial inspection it looks pretty damn good. There's still some spots that are going to need a little bit of sanding and polishing here and there. So happy with how that's turned out.
So the next thing I did was break out the jigsaw to trim off all of the rough edges, and then use a pressure washer to clean off all the plasticine and PVC release agent. Off camera, I gave it a bit of a go over with some sandpaper, starting off at 600 grit and worked my way up to 1500 grit over the entire mould just to really smooth it out, get rid of any high spots, and then went over it with a buffing wheel with some cutting compound.
Alright, that's where we're going to have to leave this video. Now stay tuned for the next one, because we're actually going to make the carbon Kevlar roof skin. Spoiler alert, it actually worked somehow. So, remember to like, comment, subscribe, notification bell, all the other YouTuber shit. Check out the website, there's some cool stuff on there. Can't sell anything at the moment, not till February, but yeah, check it out.